This is Liren versus Caruana. They played a Slav defense. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3 are the main moves. And we went into a Slav proper here. Okay, another move is to play e6, and that enters the semi-Slav. And there are a couple of interesting lines. Bishop g5 sacks the pawn on c4, and white gets a strong center. b5 protects the pawn. White attacks the knight, and this is the Botvinnik variation. So black needs to counterattack the bishop, and this is how the line goes. And white will regain the piece, and it's very sharp. If black doesn't want to enter those complications after bishop g5, he can try h6. And if white takes the knight, then we get a calmer game. I think it's known as the Moscow variation. Instead of bishop g5, a more modest way to play is to keep the bishop inside the pawn chain and defend the c4 pawn. And another famous popular line runs like this, and this is known as the Moran variation. And the point is white's going to protect the b5 pawn and then push the c5 pawn and fianchetto the light squared bishop. So those are some lines in the semi-Slav. But we played a Slav defense here. Black played d takes c4. Now black wants to play b5 in this position, so white stops it with a4. That's the main line. Bishop to f5. So black wants to get that bishop on the f5 square in the Slav, and that partly explains this move, d takes c4. If black tries to get that bishop out to f5 first, that gives white an extra option of queen to b3, attacking the recently undefended b7 square. So black stops that option by taking on c4, so there is no queen to b3, and then plays bishop to f5. Now there are two main ways to play here. One way is to play e3 and just recover the pawn on c4, and this is a main line. But in this game, white played knight to e5, attacking the c4 pawn, and the point of that move is to get in f3 and e4 and get a strong center. And it can be quite tactical and complicated. Okay, e6 was played, f3, bishop b4, white takes the pawn, black castles, and now here white played king to f2, unpinning the knight. And I'll point out it's tempting to play e4, but I think that's a known mistake. Black has a strong sacrifice. Knight takes the pawn, bishop takes, no, rather queen comes to h4 with a check, forks the king and the pawn. And you can't play g3 here because then the rook would fall. So the king moves to d2, and then black takes on e4, and white's in a lot of trouble. The line runs queen to f3, queen takes d4 check, king e1, and black has a lot of compensation for the loss of the pawn, including 3 pawns, in fact, for the loss of the piece, rather. So king f2 was played. e5 was a novelty by Caruana. Previously, moves have been tried were c5 and bishop g6. e5 is an interesting novelty that didn't work out so well. The engine likes white in this position. Here's the point. It gives away the pawn immediately, seemingly for no reason, but there is a reason. Bishop to c2 was played. The idea is if white takes the bishop, then queen takes d4 check, picks the knight up that was just lured there by the push to e5. And after something like e3, queen takes knight, the entrance says the position is perfectly equal. Okay, but Liren did not take the bishop. He played queen to d2 and retained a good position. Black tried c5. White kept the d-file closed. Okay, still at that point, White doesn't want to take the bishop because of that fork. So White keeps the d-file closed, and now he's threatening the bishop on c2, so it moves to b3, and then White gets a great center with e4, and White went on to win this game.